Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Feby Triayuni. My student ID number is 202101060022. I'm from TBI1. And now I'm gonna explain about the problem of translation and the solution. The first is title. Title is important part of the book that can make the customer decide to buy a book. Good title also can make the book saleable. That's why the translators should pay attention to decide the best title for the book. The translator should be creative and still have to decide the best which one the best for the title. And the second is stylized language. Translators are often required to source and examine original material and critiques in both language in order to establish the correct mood, tone, and style. Another stylistic problem can be presented by purposeful awkwardness in the original that simply doesn't work in the new language. The important thing is that the translation shouldn't call attention to itself in a way that will mark the reader's experience of the book. The third is regional dialect. This part is there is a fine line between making foreign authors accessible to some language readers and making them sound like the language readers. The rhythm and patterns of their own languages are part of what makes them interesting, and it can be mistake to iron them out completely. Sometimes the idioms need a little explanation for reader, while leaving in too many unknown cultural references will weaken a book and lose readers. There are must be uh, there must still be an essence of something different. Some languages need lengthy explanation which can be cumbersome and force translator to rely on glossaries and note in order to provide the necessary explanation. Next is strong language. In some cultures, swearing is an everyday activity, whereas in many other countries, bad language is considered to be less acceptable. Another problem is the wealth of expletive in another language that cannot be matched by other language equivalent. Often, the translator will clean up the strong language in the original without realizing because they isn't comfortable with it, even though the original writer was and the translator tend to realize it only after an editor has pointed it out. Next is colloquialism. The most important issue with slang is timelines. With some translation, you can almost identify the real or a man in which it must have been translated. It can be a question of getting exactly the right translator for the job or help to employ a second translator with a good working knowledge of colloquialism, dialect, and slang in native country, who can get across their meaning and help to come up with English equivalent that are appropriate. Next is humor. Humor can give a problem for translator. Something that hugely funny in another language can flat in English. Equivalent may simply out of context, and it can make a nonsensical. To overcome that problem, the translator can replace the joke than literal translation, replacing jokes from original language with comparable joke in the new one. Next is untranslatable words and culture-specific references. Some words simply don't translate it. Some words simply don't translate. Leave the text and provide glossary which can serve the purpose of explaining cultural references without interrupting the text with lengthy explanation. Next is quotation from other sources. Some quotes simply don't translate and are best dropped. Others must be altered to make their meaning and relevance to the text clear. In these cases, a translators must be given some license to make appropriate changes. A direct replacement might also be necessary in case of lyrics. In some cases, permission may be required to reproduce someone else's translation. Difficult language. English is often the key bridging language into another language. Thus, to publish an excellent translation in English is to open up possibility of further translation of that little into other language throughout the world. A translator whose work will be reused in this way should be paid a fee for that reuse and given a proper acknowledgement or credit in the new translation. Also, permission would need be cleared with the right holders of both the English language translation and the original work.